Sebastian Siemiatkowski, the CEO who publicly claimed AI was doing the work of 700 agents at Klarna, began quietly adding human agents back 18 months later. The most celebrated corporate AI experiment of 2024 had reversed course. And that reversal explains why most enterprise AI is still failing to deliver. Chapter 1. Why did Klarna's AI victory fall apart? In February 2024, Klarna, the Swedish buy now pay later company, announced that its AI assistant was handling 2 out of every 3 customer chats. The system resolved routine issues in under 2 minutes. It supported more than 30 languages simultaneously, and the company estimated it was avoiding $40 million a year in staffing costs. The CEO, Sebastian Siemiatkowski, said the AI was doing the work of 700 full-time agents. Headlines called it the future of work. Investors asked why every company wasn't doing the same thing. For the first few months, the metrics looked perfect. Resolution times dropped. First contact rates held steady on simple queries like order status and password resets. Operational costs fell. The narrative was that Klarna had cracked the customer service automation problem that other companies were still approaching cautiously. But by early 2025, something was going wrong that the resolution time metrics couldn't capture. Customer satisfaction scores on complex interactions were dropping. Billing disputes, fraud claims, account closures, hardship requests, these are not routine queries. These are the moments when a customer decides whether to stay with your platform or leave. Customers who failed to get resolution from the AI had to contact support repeatedly. Some contacted 3 or 4 times for the same issue. The repeat contact rate climbed. What looked like a $40 million efficiency gain was partially evaporating into customer churn and recontact costs. The obvious explanation is that the AI wasn't good enough. The model performed exactly as designed on routine queries. It answered the questions it was trained to answer, but poor AI quality is actually the symptom. The real mechanism is that the system had been designed as if customer service were a uniform task that could be fully automated, rather than a system with distinct tiers of complexity, emotional sensitivity, and regulatory risk. The AI excelled at the routine 70%. It degraded on the high-stakes 30%. The exact interactions that determine whether a customer stays or leaves, whether a fraud claim is properly flagged, whether a regulator takes interest. Klarna didn't abandon AI. They restructured around it. AI now handles routine volume, human agents handle escalations. The company rebuilt hybrid routing rules based on query complexity and customer tier. They added stricter confidence thresholds before the AI auto-responds. The 700 agent story became a lesson in what happens when you substitute labor without redesigning the work. If we remove all the complicated words, the lesson is simple. Klarna tried to replace people without redesigning the work, and the work pushed back. I thought the story was about AI quality. It isn't. It's about category error. A $40 million efficiency gain that was partially evaporating into churn. That number is incomprehensible. Klarna's reversal is not the outlier. It is the warning that the rest of the economy is ignoring. Chapter 2. Where are the productivity gains? In March 2026, Ronnie Walker, a senior economist at Goldman Sachs, who analyzes corporate earnings trends, published a research note that should have reset the entire conversation. He found that 70% of S&P 500 management teams discussed AI on their earnings calls. Only 1% quantified its impact on actual earnings. The economy-wide productivity signal was zero. Walker was looking for a relationship between AI adoption and productivity across the entire economy. He found none, no meaningful signal. Yet buried in the same data was a striking exception. Companies that had successfully integrated AI into specific functions reported median productivity gains of around 30%, but only in 2 places: customer support, software development. Everywhere else, the gains were diffuse, hard to measure, or non-existent. This is not a new pattern. Economists saw the same lag with personal computers in the 1980s. The technology arrived first. The productivity gains arrived only after companies restructured their work around the new tools. The gap was nearly 2 decades. Before that, manufacturers in the early 1900s spent 40 years installing electric motors into factories designed for steam power. They kept the same layouts, the same pulley systems, the same workflows. Productivity barely moved until they rebuilt the factories around continuous workflow and the assembly line. The obvious explanation is that AI is overhyped and simply doesn't work. But AI is delivering exactly what it promises in narrow, well-defined domains where the workflow was redesigned first. poor AI quality is actually the symptom. The real mechanism is that most companies are not redesigning anything. They are bolting AI onto existing processes and expecting the tool to compensate for organizational drift. If we remove all the complicated words, the economy is not experiencing an AI failure. It is experiencing a measurement failure that hides the real gains inside well-redesigned teams. That 30% figure is where this gets uncomfortable. It means the technology is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is the organizational work that happens before the technology is ever deployed. I kept looking for the AI failure. What I found was an organizational failure wearing AI's clothes. Economic forecasters now predict that meaningful economy-wide gains won't arrive until 2027 at the earliest, building through the late 2030s. Walker noted that companies mentioning AI alongside workforce decisions had already reduced job openings by 12%, steeper than the 8% average. The hiring is slowing before the productivity has arrived. The capital expenditure is accelerating. Tech giants are projected to spend over $600 billion on AI infrastructure this year alone, while the output remains localized and narrow. S&P Global found something equally telling. By the end of 2024, 42% of companies had abandoned most of their AI pilot projects. That number was up from 17% the year before. The pilots work in isolation. They die when they meet the reality of messy operations. Ronnie Walker's analysis leaves us with a puzzle. If the technology works in specific places, why does it disappear in the aggregate? Chapter 3. What are the 6% doing differently? McKinsey & Company, the management consulting firm that has surveyed global executives on AI adoption since 2017, published its 2025 State of AI report in November. The firm asked nearly 2,000 executives across 105 countries a direct question. Is your AI investment showing up on the bottom line? 88% said they were using AI in at least one business function. Only 6% reported meaningful enterprise-wide profit impact. The obvious explanation is that the 6% simply spend more money on AI. McKinsey found that budget size does not distinguish high performers from the rest. But bigger budgets are actually the symptom. The real mechanism is that high performers allocate those budgets to workflow redesign, not to fancier models. High performers are nearly 3 times as likely as everyone else to say they have fundamentally rebuilt their workflows around AI. They do not ask how AI can make their current process faster. They ask what the process would look like if it were designed from scratch, with AI capabilities available. That question sounds simple. It is the hardest question in corporate transformation, because it forces executives to admit that their current workflow may be the problem. This is the 10-20-70 rule in action. Industry research from major universities suggests the optimal resource split for AI transformation is 10% algorithms, 20% technology and data infrastructure, and 70% people and processes. Most companies invert that ratio. They buy the tool first and figure out the work later. They spend 70% on software and 20% on change management. Then they express confusion when adoption stalls and the return on investment disappoints. McKinsey's high performers do the reverse. They map the workflow before they select the model. They determine which tasks require human judgment, which can be automated, and which need a hybrid handoff. Then they rebuild the process from the ground up. They install feedback loops where humans validate AI outputs. They redefine the role of the worker from task executor to exception handler and quality validator. Only then do they deploy the technology. Their senior leaders are 3 times more likely to actively champion the transformation rather than delegate it to the technology department. If this sounds abstract, here is the concrete version. High performers draw the workflow on paper before they buy the software. Everyone else buys the software and hopes the workflow will figure itself out. The 6% are not using better AI. They are using AI better. I assumed this was a technology race. It's a process design race. Industry analysts estimate the long-term opportunity at over $4 trillion in additional productivity growth. But that number only materializes for organizations that treat AI as an operating model, not a software purchase. Chapter 4. Why does AI fail at broken processes? A marketing operations team at a mid-sized consumer brand was drowning in campaign data. Leadership approved an AI dashboard that would automatically generate performance summaries. The pitch was seductive. The result was faster confusion. The team had 4 different attribution models, disconnected data sources, inconsistent tagging conventions, and no standardized campaign taxonomy. Automating this chaos did not produce insight. It produced polished nonsense, confident-sounding summaries with statistical rot at the core. The AI was doing exactly what it was told. The problem was that what it was told to do made no sense. This is what happens when AI meets a broken process. AI is a force multiplier. It multiplies whatever it is given. If it is given ambiguity, it produces ambiguous output at scale. If it is given redundant workflows, it automates the redundancy. If it is given unclear ownership, it generates recommendations that no one is accountable for. The dashboard outputs what it is fed. Healthcare provides an even starker example. Nature Health, a medical research publisher, reported in 2025 that over 80% of US hospitals have not adopted AI at all, largely because patient data lives in fragmented, non-interoperable electronic health record systems that resist integration. Connecting a single AI application to a hospital's existing infrastructure can cost up to $750,000. The data is not ready, so the AI cannot work. The obvious explanation is that these organizations need better AI tools. But the marketing team and the hospitals both proved that the tool was not the constraint. Better AI cannot fix a workflow that lacks clear rules, clean data, or defined outcomes. Better tools are actually the symptom. The real mechanism is that AI requires structural clarity to function. Without it, the system outputs what it is fed. If this sounds confusing, here is how it really works. AI does not discover coherence, it requires it. Before you automate a workflow, you must be able to draw it on paper. You must know who makes each decision, what data they use, and what success looks like. Most organizations skip this step. They automate first and rationalize later. That order is fatal. I thought the waste came from buying the wrong software. The waste comes from buying software to automate confusion. That hospital finding is worth sitting with for a moment. Over 80% of US hospitals have not adopted AI, not because the models aren't capable, but because the organizational plumbing cannot support them. Chapter 5. What happens next? In 1882, Thomas Edison, the inventor who built the first commercial power station in Manhattan, watched factory owners rush to install electric motors. They simply swapped steam engines for electric ones in the same buildings with the same layouts and the same workflows. Productivity barely moved for 40 years. It took 4 decades for manufacturers to reimagine their factories around continuous workflow and the assembly line. Only then did the gains arrive. Robert Solow, the MIT economist, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on economic growth, observed the same lag with computers in 1987. He noted that you could see the computer age everywhere, except in the productivity statistics. The gains arrived only after business process re-engineering forced companies to restructure work around digital tools. The pattern is consistent. The technology arrives first, the organizational redesign lags behind, the productivity shows up last. We are living through the same lag with AI. Economic forecasters predict that meaningful economy-wide productivity gains will not materialize until 2027, building through the late 2030s. Industry analysts estimate the long-term opportunity at over $4 trillion. The bulls and bears are not debating whether AI will matter, they are debating when. And the when depends entirely on how fast organizations can redesign their workflows. The organizations that win will not be the ones with the largest AI models. They will be the ones that treat AI as a reason to rebuild their workflows. A small group of companies has already figured this out. They redesigned first, then deployed. Meanwhile, nearly half of all companies abandoned most of their AI pilots by the end of 2024. They bought the tool, skipped the process work, and watched the pilot die in the gap between a working model and a broken workflow. The obvious explanation is that we need to wait for better technology. But the technology we have already delivers 30% gains in the 2 domains where work has been redesigned. Better models are actually the symptom of impatience. The real mechanism is that organizations must do the unglamorous work of mapping processes, cleaning data, defining handoffs, and rebuilding workflows before the next model generation arrives. If we remove all the complicated words, the system is actually simple. AI is not a tool you deploy. It is a new operating model you grow into. I thought the question was when AI would get good enough. The question is when we will be organized enough to use it. 4 decades. That number doesn't care about your quarterly earnings call. The story is ongoing. The models will keep improving. It's hard to know exactly how long the lag will last. We'll see whether the 6% becomes 60% or stays a niche. Chapter 6. A final reflection. But here's the thing. The technology is not waiting for us. The only question is whether our organizations will be ready to absorb it. Coincidence stops being an answer when the same pattern repeats across electricity, computers, and AI. It becomes the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Why do we keep buying the future before we have fixed the present? What process in your organization would you redesign first if you knew AI was coming, whether you prepared for it or not?